Most lawyers are stupid, especially our acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche. I remember watching Todd Blanche lose the Manhattan criminal trial back in 2024, almost 2 years to the date, when Donald Trump became a convicted felon. And I remember thinking, Todd Blanche, idiot. And now he's our acting Attorney General, performing witch hunts on an industrial scale for Donald Trump that will necessitate an equally industrial scale pardon from Trump after the Senate refuses to confirm Todd Blanche as permanent Attorney General. He thinks he's going to be the Attorney General permanently. Not going to happen. And Trump is going to have to pardon him. Now, under federal law, an acting Attorney General can serve for 210 days, and then he has to either be confirmed by the Senate or leave. There are some shady workarounds, but Trump could possibly nominate someone else after 210 days and allow Todd Blanche to stick around during the nominating process. But he's not going to get nominated. He's not going to get nominated to be Attorney General. It's generally agreed that since Bondi was fired, Blanche gets 210 days as acting Attorney General. And because he's stupid, Todd Blanche is very, very stupid. He thinks this is an audition. He thinks if I do everything right, if I do everything Donald Trump asked me to do, I will be rewarded by Donald Trump. He will nominate me for the permanent slot. But everything Donald Trump is making Todd Blanche do makes Todd Blanche unable to get confirmed by this Senate. Todd Blanche has committed crimes never seen before. And the confirmation hearings, Trump cannot nominate Todd Blanche to go before the Senate for confirmation hearings because it's an opportunity for Democrats, the media, even Republicans to expose all the crimes Todd Blanche is committing right now in the service of Donald Trump's corruption. Todd Blanche's time as acting Attorney General expires on October 29th, just 4 days before the midterms. By then, Todd Blanche will have thoroughly debased himself and covered his reputation in so much Trump sludge. There's no way he's going to be nominated. There's no way he can get confirmed. He's also going to be subject to criminal prosecution, which Trump will pardon him out of. But he will lose. If this republic survives, Todd Blanche is going to lose his law licenses the same way Rudy Giuliani lost his, the same way John Eastman, Kenneth Chesebro lost their licenses, and there are no pardons, no presidential pardons to protect Todd Blanche from losing his ability to earn a living, to practice law in New York or Washington. He will be the first real casualty of the second Trump administration. Before Trump leaves office, Blanche is going to be out of the Department of Justice, and he will then begin losing his law licenses. There has never been an acting Attorney General this stupid and this corrupt. Again, especially stupid because Todd Blanche thinks by performing Trump's dirty work, he's going to get rewarded with the nomination to become permanent Attorney General. Now, Trump wants to give that job to Lee Zeldin, who is the current head of the EPA. But first he needs Todd Blanche to go in and get even with everybody and help Trump pocket, so far, $1.5 billion? Right now, Trump needs a desperately stupid man breaking the law as our top law enforcer. I don't see this ending well for Todd Blanche. No, he's not going to prison, but he's going to pay a huge price for what he's been willing to do for Donald Trump. So it's kind of sad because there is something almost pathetic about Todd Blanche. He worked his way through Brooklyn Law School at night. He was working at the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York as a paralegal. And at night, nobody handed him anything. At night, he was attending Brooklyn Law School. He graduated cum laude in 2003. He never had a free ride in his life. But he's stupid. He's stupid. He thought Donald Trump would be my free ride. And he's been intoxicated. Finally, somebody's going to hand something to me. Yeah. An opportunity to lose my licenses to practice law in New York and Washington, D.C. This is The Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. We had a very busy weekend. Not a good one for Trump. Trump was hoping to host a big celebration for his 80th and the nation's 250th birthday. That would be next month. Gala after gala. The National State Fair was going to be called. They scheduled gala after gala in front of the Capitol building. It's been turned into an even bigger disaster than the one he had planned. So what's the headline about the gala? Milli Vanilli canceled. Right. Like, I think, he's just effing with us, right? They booked Milli Vanilli, not the ones who got busted. This is like when you look at the lineup, it's a cognitive test to see how much you can remember from the 1980s or the 1970s. So they didn't book Milli Vanilli, the ones who got busted for lip syncing. They booked the ones whose voices Milli Vanilli were lip syncing to. Nobody wants to see them. We want to see Milli Vanilli lip syncing. So they were scheduled to perform one of the nights of the big gala, but they ended up canceling because nobody ever bothered to ask them if they were available. I mean, obviously they were available, so they just got booked by the Trump administration. The Trump administration never bothered to ask them. They just scheduled them. Do you have any idea of the level of incompetence? First, to book the vocalists behind Milli Vanilli and not Milli Vanilli, thinking people want to see the vocalists behind Milli Vanilli. So that's the first level. And then you go 10 levels down because they never bothered to ask. They just put them on the bill. And they said no. They don't want to be any part of it. Bret Michaels from Poison canceled. Morris Day, I love Morris Day from The Time. He said he didn't know he had been booked, but said no thank you. Young MC, here's the cognitive test. Remember Bust a Move? You want it, you got it. Young MC, he canceled. The Commodores canceled. I don't know if it's the Commodore computer where Bill Gates built MS-DOS or the Commodore's singing group. CC Music Factory canceled. Everybody Dance Now. Everybody. I don't want to get dinged by that corporate. Everybody Dance Now. Remember that? Look, I love all their music. But this was back in the 80s, the 70s. These are the people working the rest home circuit where Trump should be living right now. Martina McBride said McNo. One good piece of sunlight, Vanilla Ice, said yes, but he's already been scheduled to work as an usher during the event, so he figured why not get up and stage and sing. Milli Vanilli, no. Vanilla Ice said yes. Maybe one of Milli Vanilli will do a duet with Vanilla Ice. They'll call it Milli Vanilla. No. Trump is furious. He wants to cancel he wants to cancel our nation's 250th birthday because nobody wants to perform for him. He said last night I'm not making this up. He said, forget it, cancel everyone, and I'll perform. I swear he said this. He said, not making this up, he said, I'm bigger than Elvis. Well, maybe fatter than Elvis. He said, I can sell more tickets than Elvis. Yes, because Elvis is dead. And you're not selling tickets. All your events are free, Donald. You've never charged anyone to come see you perform. Meanwhile, members of our military were ordered to show up to the event. But Pete Hegseth said, no fatties. You have to be in shape to be ordered to show up for what they're calling the Great American State Fair. It's 2 consecutive weekends in the middle of June in Washington, D.C. to celebrate Trump and America. And now nobody knows if it's going to happen. Nobody knows. A judge on Friday said Donald Trump has to take his name off the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the Donald Trump and John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. And so Trump will appeal the ruling. Let me give you a little perspective here, because I didn't realize this until he slapped his name on the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. 2 months after Kennedy was assassinated, Congress in early 1964 passed a law that turned the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts into a permanent memorial to John Fitzgerald Kennedy. So they said, we're going to build a center for the performing arts. It's going to be called the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. And this will be a memorial to a president who tragically shot down in the prime of his life. Most of us are too young to understand the trauma his assassination wrought on this country. So the law says it is the official memorial to John Fitzgerald Kennedy. So in Washington, D.C., you got the Jefferson Memorial, you got your Washington Memorial, and you got your center, your Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the official memorial to JFK. This is tantamount to slapping your name on the Lincoln Memorial. No different by law. No different. It could be, he might as well be calling it the Donald Trump Abraham Lincoln Memorial. Trump, in violation of the law, slapped his name on the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Put his name in it. And now a judge, it finally, the wheels of justice move slowly, but it finally went before a judge. And a judge said, no. Where do you see in the law your name? And now he's been ordered, remove your name from the Donald J. Trump and John Fitzgerald Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. You have 2 weeks. Of course, he puts his name first. So after a judge says, strip your name from the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, even a very sick man knows when to stop. Not Trump, because he's a very, very sick man, and he's appealing the judge's ruling. Trump is insisting it be called the Donald Trump and John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. You don't get a memorial. One of the ways you earn a memorial is by shuffling off this mortal coil. That's how you get your memorials. But now they're putting Trump's face on this newly minted $250 bill. Again, you only get your face on our currency if you are no longer with us. What's going on? Well, maybe last week's visit to Walter Reed, which was Trump's third in little more than a year, maybe that physical revealed something a lot more onerous and alarming than anyone in the White House is willing to admit. I'd hate to think that by the time we see a $250 bill with Donald Trump's face on it, that it was on time. I would hate for that to happen. Well, no peace deal with Iran. We were so close. This time I really believed Lucy was going to hold the football. It's not even worth dignifying. All last week I said to you, it's not going to happen. He will be stringing everyone along until the midterms. Hormuz remains closed because Trump was put into office by the oil companies, and the longer Hormuz remains shut, the more money the oil companies make. Shell doubled their profits over a year. Aramco, not record profits, but the first quarter doubled their profits over the previous quarter. You shut Hormuz, there's a lot of money for the oil companies. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care that 40 million people are being thrown into famine because the fertilizer can't reach them. A federal judge launched an investigation to Donald Trump's $1.8 billion weaponization fund. Now, this has the potential to be the thing that brings him down. It's always something you may not be paying attention to that takes somebody out. Okay, this does have the potential. I believe this weaponization fund has the potential to destroy Donald Trump permanently, has the potential. I know it's going to destroy Todd Blanche. He's not going to go to prison for it, but he slapped his name on this weaponization fund agreement, and he's going to get disbarred. No question about it. And it has the potential to be the very thing that destroys Donald Trump. Now, obviously, everything Trump does has the potential to destroy him. Under any other administration, Trump would already be serving 6 consecutive life sentences, but it's Donald Trump. I do believe, though, this has the potential to destroy Trump, the potential, because it calls into question the entire premise of our Department of Justice, the entire premise of our courts and our legal system. Todd Blanche, our acting attorney general, conspired with Trump's personal lawyers, of which he once was. He conspired to create a taxpayer-funded slush fund to pay not just the January 6ers, but any Republican member of Congress or any Trump supporter or any Trump family member, if they can convince Todd Blanche and his handpicked panel of experts that they were unfairly targeted by the Biden Justice Department. Never mind that Russiagate and the Mueller prosecutions all began during the first Trump administration. Never mind that Trump's tax returns were leaked during his first administration, and the person who leaked them was later prosecuted by the Biden Justice Department. This slush fund that has been established is predicated on the lie that Trump, his family, his allies were all victims of the Biden administration's weaponization of the government. The truth is the Biden Justice Department prosecuted and convicted anyone who broke into the Capitol on January 6. Do you think that's weaponized? You saw what happened on January 6. Do you think those people should be prosecuted for breaking into the Capitol? How is that weaponizing our government? The truth is the Biden Justice Department indicted Trump and only Donald Trump for inciting January 6. Nobody else. Jack Smith didn't indict anybody else for January 6 inside the White House. People who broke in got indicted, but only Trump was indicted by the Biden Justice Department for January 6. And they also indicted Trump for not returning classified documents after he left office. And then, with superseding indictments, he was indicted for conspiring to hide those classified documents from the FBI. Stanley Woodward, who's now number 3 at the Justice Department, was the lawyer for Walt Nauta and a couple of other defendants in the classified documents indictment. They did indict Trump, along with Walt Nauta and a few other Mar-a-Lago employees, for conspiring to withhold documents from the FBI. That's the total extent, the full extent of the Biden Justice Department's targeting of Donald Trump and his immediate associates. Stanley Woodward, the number 3 man in the Justice Department, was the lawyer for some of the defendants in the classified documents trial, which got thrown out. He now helped negotiate this big settlement that gave us the slush fund. The Biden administration had nothing to do with the Mueller report or the Mueller investigation or Russiagate. Donald Trump keeps claiming Russiagate, the Russia hoax, that was the Biden administration coming after me. No, that was all investigated and litigated and disposed of by the time Biden took office. Manafort, Trump's campaign manager, was indicted, convicted, and needed to be pardoned by Donald Trump on his way out of the White House in January of 2021. Michael Flynn, his first national security advisor, pled guilty, pled out. Roger Stone, convicted of witness tampering, all during the Trump administration, his first administration. Go look up all the people Donald Trump pardoned on his way out of the White House in January of 2021. It had nothing to do with the Biden administration. Biden had nothing to do with Mueller or Russiagate. Okay? Now, this is why I think the slush fund is definitely going to bring Todd Blanche down. And maybe it's probably going to be a much bigger story as we head into the midterms. Even Lindsey Graham is saying you got to get rid of the slush fund, but it's more than just a slush fund. There are agreements that are signed in this deal that pretty much says Donald Trump never has to pay taxes. So, okay, let me just give you a brief catch-up here. Trump's tax returns, this is how the slush fund came into being. Trump's tax returns were leaked while he was president between 2018 and 2020. This had nothing to do with Joe Biden. Trump's tax returns were leaked by his internal revenue service during his first administration. But he's blaming the Biden administration because there's a fight. See, what you've got here is a fire hose of crimes and phony allegations. And so it's impossible for the American voter, especially the ones who support Trump, to keep all these facts straight. This is why I have no life. I just sit and diagram and chart all of this. And if you pay attention to it, you see the greatest con job in the history, I think, of civilization. I know, Trump fatigue, but just as an intellectual exercise without getting emotional, it's fascinating to see what he's been able not just to get away with, but to convince people of. He just wears you down. He's that 3-year-old kid that you just, okay, here's a knife. Go, play with the knife. If it's that important to you, play with the knife. I can't take it anymore. Play with the knife. Here are the keys to the car. Go, have fun. That's who Trump is. Now, again, Donald Trump, and you have to remember this, because he's claiming to be the victim of Joe Biden's weaponized Justice Department. When you see Kash Patel testifying, the head of the FBI testifying, we're repairing all the damage done by the Biden administration that kept targeting the Trump family. Trump was only prosecuted by the Biden Justice Department for 2 things: inciting the January 6th insurrection and for hiding classified material after he left office. Now, the classified material case was supposed to be a slam dunk, but a Trump-appointed judge tossed it out, and by the time Jack Smith was going through the appeals process, the American people, in their infinite stupidity, brought Donald Trump back to the White House. So, that's it. You want to accuse the Biden administration of weaponizing the Justice Department? Two sets of indictments: classified documents, inciting January 6th. And that is it. E. Jean Carroll's civil trial, where he was ordered to pay E. Jean Carroll close to $90 million after a jury ruled unanimously that Donald Trump raped her in common law parlance and then defamed her. That had absolutely nothing to do with the Biden Justice Department. In fact, that civil lawsuit began during the first Trump administration. E. Jean Carroll, nothing to do with the Biden Justice Department. Donald Trump fined $500 million in 2024 for ripping off banks and lenders. Had nothing to do with the Justice Department. That was a civil trial in the state of New York brought forth by Letitia James, New York State's Attorney General. The trial took place inside a New York State courtroom, not a federal courtroom. The Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, who successfully prosecuted Donald Trump for violating campaign finance law and destroying and fraudulent documents to hide his hush money payments to a porn star. That was Manhattan. That was the Manhattan District Attorney. Nothing to do with the Biden Justice Department. The Fulton County, Georgia RICO trial brought forth by Fani Willis. She indicted Trump. She got a grand jury to indict Trump along with 18 others for attempting to steal the 2020 presidential election in the state of Georgia. It had nothing to do with Joe Biden's Justice Department. And by the way, before the Republican-controlled courts in Georgia last November tossed out that RICO trial, Fani Willis's RICO trial, strictly on political grounds. The prosecutor said, you know what, he's a sitting U.S. president. I'm not going to pursue this. It was strictly political. We know for a fact that 4 people, including 3 of Trump's attorneys, ended up pleading guilty in that RICO trial. Kenneth Chesebro pled guilty. Lawyer Jenna Ellis pled guilty. Sidney Powell pled guilty. One other person who wasn't a lawyer pled guilty. John Eastman pled not guilty. Lawyer just lost his law license, permanently stripped from him. Kenneth Chesebro, suspended law license in Washington, D.C., stripped from him in New York State. Jenna Ellis was disciplined by the Colorado Bar. I think she got her law license back. Sidney Powell pled guilty, and the Texas Bar Association probably wanted to give her a special award. She didn't lose her license down in Texas for this. But there was a lot there in that RICO trial. Nothing to do with the weaponization of the FBI or the Biden Justice Department. The Biden Justice Department only prosecuted Trump over inciting an insurrection on January 6th and the classified documents case. Everything else was either in Manhattan, New York State, Fulton County, Georgia, or during the first Trump administration. Robert Mueller, that was Bill Barr, was the Attorney General when the Mueller report came out. Doesn't matter what the truth is. Trump's tax returns, and this is, again, why I think this story, remember, the Watergate break-in, it was just a third-rate burglary, they said. I think this story has the potential to be the thing that destroys a lot of people inside the Trump White House. Forget prison. That ship has sailed. But you can destroy lives. We see Trump doing it now, destroying lives without sending anybody to prison, prosecuting E. Jean Carroll for perjury. She's not going to go to prison. She's not going to have to pay a fine. She's going to have to pay lawyers. She's 82, 83, and she's going to have to spend the next 2 years dealing with the Department of Justice. The process is the punishment. And you're going to see that if and when Trump ever leaves office. Nobody's going to prison. I've given up hope on that. But I think the process is enough of a punishment for a lot of these Trump enablers. And once the midterms, if the midterms go the way other people say they will, a lot of people very close to Donald Trump, their lives are about to become nightmares, especially acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. I think his life becomes hell. Worse than Rudy Giuliani's, because at least Rudy Giuliani had some faux goodwill from 9/11, which he didn't deserve because he put the city's terrorism center inside the World Trade Center, even though he was told, don't do that. That's the prime target for terrorists. He said, that's where it's going. And so the police and the firefighters couldn't communicate because Rudy Giuliani put the command center, the terrorism command center, inside the World Trade Center. But at least he had goodwill going into his collapse. Todd Blanche has no goodwill. I think he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, it doesn't matter what the truth is right now, but the truth is Donald Trump's tax returns were leaked during his first term, and it was very embarrassing. Came out in 2020 when he was running for re-election. He sued the IRS in January of this year for $10 billion because the IRS leaked his tax returns in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election when he was running for re-election. The lawsuit claims Joe Biden got into a time machine to weaponize Donald Trump's Internal Revenue Service by leaking Trump's tax returns. That is basically the premise of this $10 billion lawsuit filed in January. The New York Times has a great story about it this morning. So, that's why the premise of the lawsuit and the settlement that follows, I think, either destroys Todd Blanche, the Trump White House, this Republican Party, and if it doesn't, then it destroys our entire country. For Blanche and Trump to get away with this, it calls into question our entire legal system. Everything Trump does. But this one, there's just no you cannot defend this. Donald Trump didn't sue. He sued the IRS for $10 billion in January, and then he agreed to drop his lawsuit after his very own Justice Department approached him with an offer to settle. Essentially, it is Trump, the President of the United States, suing his Internal Revenue Service and his Justice Department, offering to make a deal with Trump. So Trump is essentially suing himself. You have on one side of the lawsuit the President of the United States and his personal lawyers like Boris Epstein, who is still indicted in Arizona for the phony elector scheme. That trial is still going on. So you have Trump as a private citizen, President of the United States, and his personal lawyers. And then on the other side of the trial, you have the Department of Justice, which answers to Donald Trump. It's run by Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, again, who up until Trump returned to the Oval Office was Trump's very bad criminal defense attorney. Because of Todd Blanche, Donald Trump is the only convicted felon ever to have been or be president of the United States. And what Todd Blanche did, and signed his name to it, he did this without the judge in the case overseeing any of it. He allowed the two parties to reach a settlement. In other words, the Justice Department, representing the IRS, which Donald Trump was suing for $10 billion, the Justice Department agreed to settle with Donald Trump, private citizen, and my boss, and it was signed, sealed, and delivered. I think around May 20th we learned about this. And the judge, where the lawsuit was filed, played no part in the settlement. That makes it fraud. And a panel of retired judges last week petitioned the court to reopen the trial and look at the settlement, and that's what's going on right now. The judge is now saying, wait a second, you guys settled a lawsuit that I don't even think qualifies as a lawsuit. There's no adversarial relationship. How can Donald Trump sue his own IRS and then make a deal with his own Justice Department? And now Todd Blanche has about 2 weeks to explain what happened. The Justice Department cannot settle a lawsuit with anybody, especially the President of the United States, without the judge presiding over that lawsuit sanctioning the settlement. We're not supposed to understand this because that's why they get away with it. It is the most outrageous abuse of presidential. It's just nothing. The Grant, Nixon, nothing comes close. Nothing. The Harding administration, Teapot, nothing comes close to just this alone. Forget everything else. This is perhaps the most extravagant example of graft and corruption in any White House ever. So part of the agreement was for Trump to drop his $10 billion lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service. This agreement that our acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, signed included a 1.8. The deal was, okay, I'll drop the lawsuit, but you have to create a $1.8 billion weaponization slush fund. And that would be paid to people who can prove they are victims of the Biden Justice Department. So people involved in Russiagate, which had nothing to do with the Biden, are they going to be able to step forward and say they were unfairly prosecuted by the Biden administration when, in fact, they were prosecuted by Trump's Justice Department? It also includes, and they did this, Blanche added this. First, they announced the weaponization fund, and then he quietly placed an addendum to the deal 2 days later, and you could only see it on the website. The New York Times wrote about it this morning. And he quietly, Todd Blanche, added to the deal that the Internal Revenue Service will drop all audits of Donald Trump, all ongoing audits of Donald Trump, his family, his corporations. There must be 10,000 shell corporations. Those audits will close, as well as audits of Trump's closest allies. Whatever, according to this deal, whatever audits the IRS was conducting are now over. So a judge last week issued an order stopping this memorandum from going into effect, but that is what Blanche, the acting Attorney General, signed his name to. A deal from which Trump stands to keep the $100 million he reportedly owes the IRS for falsely claiming a $100 million loss on a Chicago skyscraper he didn't own. This is what he got busted by the, I mean, except for the fact that so many millions are dying because of him. It's kind of funny. He literally claimed a loss on a Chicago skyscraper he didn't own. I mean, you know, the joke, if you rent, you always joke about selling the home that you're renting without telling the landlord. He kind of does that. He just said, I'm going to take a loss on a skyscraper that I don't own. The fraud is at a scale never before seen. It's so blatant. There are some who are suggesting that Todd Blanche could end up going to prison in the state courts. There's nothing a pardon from Trump can do to protect Todd Blanche from state prosecution. And he's definitely not going to be able to keep his law licenses. I am done after the 2024 election. I am done with certitude. But I am pretty certain that Todd Blanche is going to be the first major casualty here. He's going to lose his license to practice law. Probably it'll start next year because he's not going to be nominated for permanent attorney general. He's going to leave the job right before the midterms because that's the law. And then he goes into private practice. He'll get a pardon, but pardons don't protect you from civil lawsuits, and they do not protect you from state and local criminal prosecutions, and they most certainly do not protect you from losing your law licenses in D.C. and New York State. Todd Blanche, when all is said and done, will never be able to practice law. But when you think about it, has he ever? It's kind of sad because he truly is a self-made man, one of the few self-made people in the Trump White House. Worked his way through night school, Brooklyn Law School, worked his way through law school. went to night school, very noble, Brooklyn Law School, not Harvard. He's the kind of person I would root for. Now I want to see him in prison. This is huge. This is huge. And when I say huge, I mean it's theft on a massive scale, not just of money, it's theft of our legal institutions. It's transforming the entire Department of Justice and the Internal Revenue Service, pretty much all of Washington, D.C.'s administrative state, into Donald Trump's personal candy store. Now, eventually it'll go before the Supreme Court, but that's years from now. This will be during Trump's third term. We know the Supreme Court will eventually allow Trump to prevail in practically everything by ignoring practically everything. The way the court works, this Supreme Court, this incredibly corrupt Supreme Court works, is they disingenuously drill down to one singular constitutional question. So by the time this story reaches the Supreme Court, it won't be about Donald Trump or Todd Blanche colluding to steal money from the government by creating a phony legal settlement that was never adjudicated by a judge. It will be about something like Article 3 of the Constitution and whether checks and balances prevent the judicial branch from blocking a president who stole our entire nation's treasury. Believe me, with this Supreme Court, they will make this about prosecutorial overreach. Forget the trillions of dollars that Donald Trump will end up stealing from us. The Supreme Court will be wringing its hands over too much prosecutorial power when it comes to presidents or former presidents. So this settlement was struck. I mean, it's just incredible. Think about this. You have Donald Trump as a private citizen in January of this year striking a deal with his old criminal attorney, Todd Blanche, who's now acting attorney general. He strikes a deal, agrees to withdraw his $10 billion lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service, and we're supposed to pay for the settlement. No, that's not how it works. A settlement like that needs to be adjudicated by the Kathleen Williams, who presides as a federal judge on the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida, where Trump first filed his $10 billion lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service back in January of this year, claiming he had been irreparably damaged after the Internal Revenue Service leaked his tax returns to the New York Times and ProPublica. So he went venue shopping in January. He goes down to the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida, even though the leak took place in Washington, D.C. So he was venue shopping because Eileen Cannon, who threw out the classified documents trial case, was also in Florida. He's going to get a more friendly federal judge in Florida. But that was Jack Smith's decision to try the classified documents case in Florida because it was such a slam dunk. He figured he wanted to make it. This is true. Jack Smith indicted Trump in Washington, D.C. for inciting the insurrection, but he decided to have him indicted in Florida because that's where Trump was hiding the classified documents, and he wanted to. It was such a slam dunk. He figured, why not make it a fair fight and have it take place in a federal courtroom where Trump might find a sympathetic judge, and he did. So, again, I hate to be a broken record here, but this is really important. The leak of Donald Trump's tax returns took place not during the Biden administration. The leak took place during the first Trump administration. So Trump, in January, filed a $10 billion lawsuit against his Internal Revenue Service, which leaked his tax returns. Donald Trump's tax returns were leaked by the IRS. It went over, it was like between 2018 and 2020 is when the leak began. And then it was published in 2020 by ProPublica and the New York Times. And I haven't even gotten to what was in the leak. That was not Joe Biden's weaponization of the Internal Revenue Service or the Justice Department. Nobody was wasn't Democrats punishing Donald Trump. It was Donald Trump's Justice Department and his own IRS punishing Donald Trump. Like I said at the top of the show, and I know it's a lot to process, I know that. It was the Biden Justice Department that prosecuted the IRS contractor who leaked Donald Trump's tax returns. Trump, but nobody talks about that. Or at least Trump won't tell you that. Somebody was punished for leaking Donald Trump's tax returns during the first Trump administration. That person was punished by Merrick Garland, Joe Biden's Attorney General. Again, Trump, in January of this year, sued the Internal Revenue Service for $10 billion, claiming those leaks, which happened while he was president. The premise of that $10 billion lawsuit was it was all part of the Biden administration's attempts to weaponize the government to punish Donald Trump or his enemies. Now, if you're following this, you cannot help but believe this has the potential to either break the entire administration and the Republican Party or our republic. Because if he and Todd Blanche get away with this, you cannot have a discussion anymore. You know, what about, everything's predicated now on whataboutism. It's indefensible. So, you just say, well, what about the deal that Todd Blanche made with Donald Trump to settle the $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS? What about that? How are the Republicans going to defend that other than going full-bore fascist and turning to nothing but violence? This is the next step, is violence, because there's no discourse. It's indefensible. So if they get away with this, the Republicans just get out their weapons. This is huge. There's a difference between Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche testifying under oath before Congress, which he has, or Kash Patel or Bondi testifying under oath that the Biden administration weaponized the entire government to punish Donald Trump, his friends, his family, his supporters. A big difference between saying that under oath and actually carving out a deal between the Justice Department and Donald Trump's personal lawyers to settle a $10 billion lawsuit seeking damages for vindictive activity by the Biden administration's IRS that took place before Biden was president. It was Trump's IRS that leaked his tax returns. Charles Edward Littlejohn, I think I have a picture of him. There he is. Charles Edward Littlejohn is the individual who leaked Donald Trump's tax returns. Now, if you think you're angry now, wait. He started leaking the returns back in 2018, and thanks to Joe Biden, Littlejohn is currently serving a 5-year sentence at a federal correctional institution inside Marion, Illinois. He pled guilty on October 12th, 2023, while Biden was president. He pled guilty to unauthorized disclosures of Trump's private tax returns after the Biden Justice Department charged him with that very crime on September 29th, 2023. So just step back here, because I know this stuff comes at you so quickly and it's impossible to process. And that's how Trump wears you down. He's the 3-year-old who won't stop. So you say, here's the knife, here are the car keys, just shut up already. Donald Trump, in January of this year, sued the Internal Revenue Service for $10 billion, claiming he was irreparably damaged by the Internal Revenue Service when it leaked his tax returns in the years 2018 through 2020 while he was president. Between 2018 and 2020, Littlejohn began leaking to the New York Times and ProPublica. And then in 2020, Trump's tax returns were published while he was president and running for re-election. Nothing to do with the Biden administration. But he sued the IRS in January for $10 billion over this, claiming he's the victim of the Biden administration weaponizing the IRS. It was the Biden administration that prosecuted Littlejohn. Now, it comes at you so fast and furiously, you need to be reminded of this. What was in the leak of Trump's tax returns? What was it? What did we discover? We discovered that in 2016, while running for president, claiming to be a billionaire, Donald Trump paid a total of, do you remember? 2016, the year he got elected president. You know what he paid in taxes? 750, how many zeros you want to add to that? Zero. $750 in federal taxes. That's how much he made in 2016. He was claiming to be a billionaire, but paid $750 in taxes, meaning he was running, as we all know, because he was broke and needed to do this as a branding exercise to pay back who? I think, and I've heard, the Russian mafia, who he was supposed to be laundering money for, but might have skimmed a little. So paid $750 in federal taxes. Well, that's very humiliating. It's why he is the only president in modern history who continues not to release his tax returns. Well, what else did those leaks in 2020 reveal? Well, during 10 of the 15 years previous to his 2016 election, in other words, going back to the year 2000, 10 out of those 15 years, he paid zero taxes. This was at the height of The Apprentice. Money was coming in. What happened to it? That was in the leak from 2020. A leak from his IRS that got published in the New York Times and ProPublica in 2020 while he was president, trying to get reelected. And when that was revealed, some people were appalled by it. It's hard to remember because he was so busy killing 1 million Americans by crapping the bed on COVID at the time. So some people forgot this, but some people remembered. And it's one of the primary reasons later that year, Joe Biden in 2020 was able to carry Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. People remember. People remembered. We forgot, but he didn't pay taxes. So what that told us is he's not a billionaire and he's a tax cheat. Okay? And all of that was revealed, exposed while Donald Trump was president, and yet he filed a $10 billion lawsuit in January of this year, claiming those tax returns that got released, that information released during his first term, irreparably damaged him. So I'm suing for $10 billion. He's not denying that he basically never paid his income taxes. He's not denying that he owes at least $100 million that we know of because he took a write-off on a Chicago skyscraper he didn't own. He's not denying that. He's not denying that he was shown not to be a billionaire. He's claiming that the leaks that told the truth irreparably damaged him. In other words, the entire premise of this $10 billion lawsuit that he filed in January is, if people learn the truth about me, Donald Trump, then I've been destroyed. That's how he arrived at the number $10 billion. He's claiming that the leak in 2020 destroyed his chances of winning the 2020 presidential election, which he also says he won. So how did you suffer $10 billion in damages, Donald Trump, if you won in 2020? That's why there was never any trial. That's why there was a settlement, because none of this holds up under scrutiny. But, he can just say, here he is, listen to him. I love this. Nobody can keep track of this. Nobody keeps track. I do. Here he is 3 days ago.
I may even release my current returns because they show I pay a lot of money.
You don't pay a lot of money, and you've never released your returns. They were leaked, and you're suing for $10 billion because they were leaked. It's pretty remarkable. So this is the mop-up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. There's a lot going on, and I'm drilling down on this story because I can't talk about anything else until I get this off my table. And I've been a little repetitive here. I get complaints. Why do you keep repeating things? Because if you go too quickly through this, you can't keep track. And most people, including me, are not smart enough to hear something once and have it sink in. We're in uncharted territory, and a lot of this stuff is stuff we're unfamiliar with. And one of the benefits of doing a podcast is you can let this breathe, and repetition. Donald Trump and Dr. Joseph Goebbels said, if you repeat a lie long enough and loud enough, people will believe it. I subscribe to the Feldman doctrine, which is if you repeat the truth loud enough and long enough, people will get it. The truth is hard, much harder to understand than the simplistic lies that Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler tell, then yes, I said Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler. They say, well, you bring up Hitler, you lost the argument. I'm not arguing. There's no argument to be had. Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler. Since every presidential election in modern American history, every presidential candidate, every president has released their tax returns. This goes back to Watergate since 1970. Every president and every presidential candidate presented their tax returns to the American people as candidates to show who gives them money. Very important to know who gives your president money. Only one candidate has never released their tax returns, Donald Trump. Now, he just said, I've released 3 tax. No, they were leaked. You didn't release them. They were leaked, and you're suing for $10 billion. Now, some of you are going to complain and say Gerald Ford didn't release his tax returns. Well, he released, and I don't know why, he released a summary of his tax returns when he was running for re-election against Jimmy Carter in 1976. I'm going to assume he was busy, but for all intents and purposes, every candidate releases their tax returns except Donald Trump. Because you're supposed to be an open book. It's not the law. It should be. It should be against the law to run for president or at least become president without being ordered to open up your books and show us your tax returns. Why isn't it the law? Trump took office again in 2025, still hasn't released his tax returns. Should be the law. Should be the law. Okay, so his tax returns leaked during his administration by Charles Edward Littlejohn, now doing time in Marion, Illinois, prosecuted by Biden because he leaked Donald Trump's tax returns during the first Trump administration, okay? Charles Edward Littlejohn is doing time. I think he gets out in a year or two. Boy, he was an IRS employee, but he was actually a contractor for Booz Allen. He wasn't actually an employee of the Internal Revenue Service. He was working for the IRS through Booz Allen. They are an outside contractor. Yes, outside contractor. Wait, it gets worse. You're going to put your fist through a wall. You know what? You should turn this off right now. If you have a heart condition, if you have rage issues, I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to put your fist through a wall. Okay? Charles Edward Littlejohn was working for Booz Allen. They are a multi-billion-dollar international contractor like Halliburton or water. What do they call it? Not water. Blackwater, which changed their names. McKinsey. These are international contractors who we trust, the federal government trusts with our secrets. So Booz Allen got a contract to do work for the IRS. Edward Littlejohn worked for Booz Allen. He became an outside contractor, and he went to work for the IRS and leaked Donald Trump's tax returns. We give a lot of federal jobs to multinational corporations like Booz Allen under the premise that jobs performed by federal employees, well, those jobs can be performed by a private corporation for a lot more money and way more inefficiently. That's why we hire subcontractors. Why make working for the government a noble profession where the employees respect taxpayer money? when you can turn that job over to Booz Allen or McKinsey, and they'll charge more to do less. And that is always the case. That is always the case. When you privatize or subcontract a government job, it costs more and they do a worse job. Now, that's just a fact. That's just a fact. Contractors cost more and their work is less reliable. Why do we allow this? Well, you and I don't. They have lobbyists in Washington, D.C. There is an economy in the United States that's worth about $33 trillion a year. Government budgets, and I've gone over the numbers with you, government budgets, when you factor in federal, state, and local, by my calculations, federal, state, and local, and the agencies around them, they're responsible for anywhere between 30 to 35. I have it as high as 40%, but I've been told that's too high. So let's just say 35, 1/3, conservatively speaking, 1/3 of our entire economy is what government spends. There is no free market. If 1/3, and I think it's 40%, is what our government spends, we're, a hybrid. We're like Sweden and Norway, except it's socialism for the rich. But this is a socialist nation. If the state is responsible for 30, 35%, I believe 40% of the entire economy, that is, socialism, a hybrid. It's socialism for the rich. You know that expression, right? Well, that's why they say it. That's where socialism for the rich comes from. So get ready, make a fist, get a pillow. Don't punch, don't break your fist. So we give out contracts to Booz Allen, McKinsey, Halliburton, Blackwater, whatever Blackwater is calling itself, because they want in on it. And that's where the real fraud is. J.D. Vance is busy investigating fraud. He wants you to believe it's the black people, the Somalians in Minneapolis who commit Medicare and Medicaid fraud. No, it's the hospitals that commit the fraud. Not the people, not the recipients of the medical care. But that's for 50 other shows that I've already done. We've already talked about this. It's corporate welfare. There's no such thing in the Republican administration as corporate welfare fraud. It's, they'll say we have to get rid of the Biden-era Obamacare subsidies because of the rampant fraud, meaning poor people are ripping. No, it's the insurance companies that are committing the fraud. But we're going to cut food stamps because of fraud. Okay. Charles Edward Littlejohn, make your fist. The guy who leaked Trump's tax returns while Trump was president, he worked for Booz Allen, which was contracting for the IRS. Booz Allen. Got your fist made? Take your pillow now and start punching as I tell you about Edward Snowden, who leaked all those NSA documents in 2013. Remember Edward Snowden? He's living in Moscow now. He proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that our government was spying on us. And he leaked the documents that proved that while he was working inside the NSA, the National Security Agency. He had top secret clearance, but start punching your pillow. Don't hurt yourself. But you gotta physically do something so you don't hurt yourself or anybody else. So just take it out on a pillow. Edward Snowden leaked National Security Agency documents while working for the National Security Agency, but he was not a government employee. He was working as a contractor for Booz Allen. Go, punch, hit. It's good to hit inanimate objects. Just, there was a time in New York City where you could actually smash a telephone and you would go to AT&T and you didn't have to say anything. They would just give you another phone because they knew. They just, yes, of course, you smashed it and here, have a new phone. Those days are over. Don't take it out on yourself. Don't take it out on others. But, exercise is good. Don't break your fist. Just punch a pillow. Edward Snowden, Booz Allen. Booz Allen got a contract with our government to handle vast tranches of classified, top secret documents, and Edward Snowden leaked them had top secret clearance. Booz Allen said to our NSA, he's good. We can trust him with all your documents. And he leaked them and proved, hey, the government's spying on us. Like we needed Edward Snowden to leak the documents to tell us that. In January of this year, our National Security Agency, under Donald Trump, awarded Booz Allen another $1.6 billion contract to manage cybersecurity for the NSA. Because, it's all about accountability. That's why they have corporate America taking government jobs, because corporate America is all about accountability. A Booz Allen employee leaks a treasure trove of NSA data. So Booz Allen continues to get billion-dollar cybersecurity deals, not just with the NSA, but the CIA and practically all the other intelligence agencies that make up the National Intelligence Service. We've got about 18 intelligence agencies that we know of. Guess who's got their filthy, rapacious paws all over those documents? Booz Allen. Now, Mr. Littlejohn is doing time because as an employee of Booz Allen, like Edward Snowden was, he leaked Donald Trump's tax returns. In January of this year, the Trump White House canceled Booz Allen's contract to work for the IRS. Accountability, right? You think, oh, okay. That deal was worth a couple of $1 million, small change. So it was just a traffic ticket because Trump wanted to punish Booz Allen over the leak of his tax returns, which happened during the first Trump administration. So you might think, one would think Donald Trump, instead of suing the Internal Revenue Service for $10 billion, Trump would have performed a national service and sued Booz Allen for $10 billion back in January of this year. It was a Booz Allen employee who leaked your tax returns. We have a problem with contractors. It would have been a public service to sue Booz Allen to prove they cannot be trusted to do government jobs. No, he continues to award Booz Allen billion-dollar contracts, except for the one with the IRS. And instead, he sues his own IRS for $10 billion. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for joining me. Please like this episode, share this episode. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping everything civil. If I made any mistakes, please correct me in the comment section. My next live episode will be Tuesday at when? 6:05 p.m. Thank you for listening.